and microphone Simon.
I'm not sure I'm able to turn everyone's cameras on from here.
How do we check whether people can hear us? Can somebody put something? Can somebody put something in the chat to say if you can hear us?
Oh, we got some thumbs up.
Oh, right, okay.
So I've allowed cameras for attendees. There we go. So I think it's now gone just after past. I have started the recording of the session. Hopefully that's going to be okay with everybody. We can record the session and we can then share it with colleagues that weren't able to attend. I'm gonna Can everybody see my screen? Yes.
Yep.
Did that just change for you? Yes, it did. Okay, right, everyone. Thank you all so much for attending. We'll make a start because we've got quite a lot to get through and not a huge amount of time. So my name is David Parks. I'm the founder and managing director of the Skill Mill, joined by some colleagues who you'll hear from over the next hour or so. We've got a lot to cover, and yeah, so we'll get started. So today is about hearing about the Skill Mill. For those of you who've not come into contact with us yet, and about social outcomes contracts and the social outcomes partnership that we're planning to put together over the coming months. You'll know that we've sent out a specification for expressions of interest to all youth offending teams, and this is an opportunity for you to hear more about how the model works and what social outcomes contracts are and how they work. So Skill Mill. So Skill Mill was set up.
Davey, just before we get going, Davey, if people have questions, could you put them in the chat? We've got a lot of people on the call and we want to make sure that everybody's got the opportunity to ask any questions. So if you can put them in the chat, we'll hoover them up and make sure that we try and answer all those as we go along. Sorry, Davey.
Yeah, no, excellent. Thanks, Andy. Absolutely. So yeah, Skill Mill is a social enterprise. That means we're a profit-driven organization. Sorry, a purpose-driven organization. We're not for profit. And we've been a social enterprise since we started in 2013. It was set up as a cross-sectoral partnership between Newcastle Youth Offending Service and the Environment Agency, and building on the, I think, unique place that the youth offending teams sit in terms of multidisciplinary working, and as an innovative idea to try and provide work opportunities for young people directly involved with the yacht. It's a proper job. It's full time. It's paid. And the young people develop very important job related skills and employability skills over 6 months that they're with us. Over the past 10 years, we've employed over 500 young people, and with a reconviction rate of around just under 10%, so about 50 young people reconvicted within 12 months of starting the programme. And that compares with, as you'll know, around about 63% nationally. Young people in the cohort that we're recruiting from have been reconvicted within 1 year. The teams are comprised of 4 young people, all aged 16 to 18, with a supervisor. And the jobs are only open to young people referred through a youth offending service. Okay, so there's a very close working relationship between the skill mill and the yacht. So the supervisors and the case managers working very closely together to maximise participation and success. We have worked across England. So we started in Newcastle, as I said, and we've developed teams right down the length of the country. The teams work in a very localized way. So they're providing services very locally, young people contributing to efforts to improve their local communities, demonstrating very much positive um, um, reflecting a very positive view of themselves and other young people involved in the justice system. And it's about making sure that we give them, every opportunity to do that within their local community. And also, we work with national partners that have a footprint across the country. And we'll hear, a little bit more about that as we go through. So the vast majority of these teams have been working through a social outcomes contract, which you'll hear more about shortly, over the past 4 years, supported through the Life Chances Fund. And what do we do? So the young people are very much engaged in activity which is outdoors. It's physically, demanding work. So they are improving their physical health as a result of doing this work. And there's a lot of contact with nature, which also has benefits for their mental health and mental well-being. We know that because we've been doing this work for 10 years, and it's been very well evaluated. And the young people themselves tell us that the thing that they enjoy most about this work is the fact that it's outdoors, and that contact with nature comes up time and time again. So we do a wide range of tasks, ranging from environmental maintenance, public space management, low-level construction jobs. So the work's often very manual, low-skilled, but over time, we develop a range of skills and experiences for the young people, so that by the time they finish the program after 6 months, they become very employable because they've developed those fundamental skills that are required in the workplace. So it's quite straightforward in terms of what we do. And as I say, we've been doing this now for 10 years, and we've got a lot of evidence of the impact that we're having with those individual young people that come through the program. I'm going to hand over to Andy now, who will talk more about more specifically the theory of change that we've developed.
David, do you mind putting the? Oh, sorry, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, do you mind putting the slides into the full presentation mode? If you just Awesome.
Is that better?
Perfect.
Yeah,
thank you. Much better.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's much.
Excellent. Okay. Good afternoon, folks. I'm Andy Peed. I'm a director at the Skill Mill. So I'm just going to spend 5 minutes on running through the theory of change. There's far too much text on this single slide, but it is a really important slide because, as David said, we've been running for 10 years now, and around 500 people have gone through the program, and so the reoffending results that have stacked up on the back of that experience are just testimony to the success of the program. So what makes the difference? We know that the supervisor is a crucial position for Skill Mill, and we put an awful lot on the role of the supervisor. It isn't for everybody because it can be a bit of a testing job at times. You've got 4 young people there day in, day out throughout the week. One of the things about Skill Mill is that in terms of contact time with young people, it's just gobsmacking in compared to other youth justice provisions. So if a young person turned up for every session every day, they do 840 hours over the course of their 6 months, and that's a massive opportunity to make a difference with those young people. So on the far left there, we've got the role of the supervisor in terms of managing that group, and in terms of mentoring them, motivating them, galvanizing them, cajoling them, being a shoulder to cry on, being their biggest supporter, just helping them through the program. We know that the kids that we work with are at the start of the program probably just about as far away from the labour market as you might guess, and the 6 months is around making the sort of the intrinsic changes that are needed to help them become work ready at the end of that. So other inputs are around the uniform. The uniform's really important. We know that most of the young people that we work with really like the simplicity of the Skill Mill uniform. It's quite positive. It's it's t-shirts and hoodies, and but importantly PPE, and we get them to understand the need for proper health and safety, and workwear that allows you to protect yourself and to do the job as best as possible. So Debbie's already said that the activities that we do are pitched around the sort of high motivation, high elbow grease type end of the spectrum. It fits very well with environmental programs, traditional sort of recreation type projects, and we've managed to tap into that particular market really. Key to that is the ability to see that you've done a good job. So that's really important in terms of helping young people build that self-identity, that self-esteem, that their capacity to make a difference and to see a change. The paid employment is really important as well. We know that that all of our young people go through a process of we don't pay people when they don't turn in for work. It's an important lesson that they need to learn. So if you don't feel like coming into work and don't turn up, your pay pack is going to be lighter at the end of the week. And the supervisors have to manage that process, because the vast majority of young people will kick off at some point in that process. But over the course of the program, and the role of the supervisor is to help young people on that journey. Young people see themselves differently. One of the things about criminal justice, about youth justice, is the system is very good at labeling people in a negative context, and almost 100% of the kids that we deal with haven't done very well at school. They haven't got much in the way of stuff to feel good about, and the Skill Mill allows them to grow that belief in themselves, grow their confidence, grow their self-esteem, to feel valued, helps them improve relationships. We get a lot of parents and carers that talk about the difference that they can see in their young people through being on the program. Fundamentally, they're tired at the end of the day, but they're engaged in constructive activities and building up that confidence. And so what we see is that actually through the program, young people start to see themselves very differently as part of the program. And so we describe that as being, in constructive resettlement terms, achieving an identity shift. And I think we know how important that is in terms of the youth justice system. We at the Skill Mill think that this is absolutely crucial into the success of the program, because young people do see themselves very differently, and we think that that's what makes the difference. They start to have a positive outlook for the future. They start to be able to see a future. They start to be able to see different opportunities. Part of the program is increasing the range and breadth of experiences that young people can experience, because we know that an awful lot of our young people don't get that sort of ability to be stretched. And the reoffending rate of single offenders is testimony to that. We try and get young people into employment. This new program will have an increased focus on that because we want to try and improve those aspects. But one of the things that we've been really pleased about is that even when we're not able to directly map young people into opportunities straight away after the program, it doesn't seem to impact on the reoffending rate. So young people, having made that shift, seem determined to be able to follow it through. So that's a very quick run through. The presentation will be shared at the end, and that's me, Davey.
Thank you very much, Andy. And as Andy says, please put your questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer them as we go through. Because as I said, yeah, we have a lot of information to share, and a lot of stuff that maybe you're familiar with, and then a lot of other things that may be quite new. So ask as many questions as possible, and we'll try to answer them as we go through. But there will be time at the end to take for a more kind of Q&A session. Andrea, would you like to go next?
Yeah, is it over to me? Thanks, Davey. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, just to make sure? Yeah, lovely. Good afternoon from snowy Oxford, everyone. My name is Andrea Anastasiou, and I'm the Executive Director of a small research centre based at Oxford University called the Government Outcomes Lab. I've spent the past 8 years of my life researching and learning from practitioners when, how, and if social outcome partnerships can lead to better outcomes and better value for money in public services. And I'm mindful Davis mentioned this phrase, social outcome partnerships, quite a few times already in his presentation. So, he's kindly invited me to distill, I guess, 80 years of work into no more than 5 minutes. But before I dive in, I actually wanted to ask everyone, just to get a sense of kind of your level of knowledge around social outcome partnerships. So can I ask everyone to maybe give me a thumbs up if you've come across social outcome partnerships, just the terminology before? Okay, I'm seeing a couple of thumbs up, hands up. Wonderful. How about if I use the term social impact bond? Does that ring a bell? Okay, fabulous, great. So I'm in great company. It sounds like I don't need to worry about the need to cover a lot of ground. And our kind of final question, if anyone's feeling brave, does anyone want to venture in the chat a kind of understanding or definition of social outcome partnerships or social impact bonds? I'll give everyone just a quick minute. It doesn't have to be just kind of what's your understanding? What do you mean when you say social outcome partnership? Okay, I can't write in the chat. Okay, maybe people are struggling to write in the chat, so I'll move us on just in the interest of time. But the reason why I wanted to start by asking you this question, have you heard of social outcome partnerships, impact bonds, is that one of my main reflections, having worked in the field for a while, is that there is a degree of confusion when it comes to these terms, and sometimes a bit of a lack of understanding. So I only want to do two things in my allocated time. And one is to briefly explain what social outcome partnerships are, and perhaps if we don't have time, and maybe we'll come on to this in the Q&A, also discuss whether or not. And then the second thing I want to do is just give you a flavor of the state of play with social outcome partnerships, because while some of you might have not come across them before, they've actually been used in the UK since 2010, and there are over 100 projects of this sort that have been launched to date. So just really simply, because when people talk about social outcome partnerships, also known as social outcome contracts and social impact bonds, really these terms are used interchangeably. People sometimes tend to jump into trying to explain in quite complex terms the sort of like dynamics of these partnerships, but simply put, they are just a way, a contractual mechanism to put outcomes, meaningful, measurable, and measured outcomes at the heart of service provision. So they're best understood as a form of cross-sector partnership that bring together organizations from across the public, the private, and the non-profit sector in the pursuit of social outcomes. And so Davy's already given you a flavor of the types of organizations involved in the Skill Mill project. And I've put here in the slide, in a social outcome partnerships, you typically have at least 3 types of stakeholders involved. One, the outcome payer, which tends to be a public sector organization. It could be local government, central government, perhaps a mix of both. And we've also seen more creative models that actually bring together outcome funding from public and non-public entities. And then we have the service providers providing services, measuring, tracking outcomes, and then socially motivated investors who crucially provide that upfront capital that providers, delivery organizations need to get services up and running. And I know we have Bridges on the session with us, so I'll maybe leave it to them to explain a little bit more about the role of socially motivated investors. Having said that, this is a model that kind of obscures a little bit of the complexity, practical complexity of social outcome partnerships, because often in practice, we see a suite of other organizations or stakeholders involved. So often we see performance managers involved in helping coordinate and manage the performance of this project. And we might also see evaluators, such as my organization, the Government Outcomes Lab, who are looking more across the board, the kind of like actual impact evaluation and so on of this project. Davy, if you click one more time, I also included on this slide some of the different motivations that the different stakeholders involved in a social outcome partnerships might have. I don't want to go into detail now just because I know we don't have the time, but perhaps again in the discussion part, we can reflect a little bit on kind of what are the incentives or the reasons why government commissioners might want to work in this way. Can I potentially use it as a way to achieve more with less? By focusing on outcomes, only paying for what works? Can they improve effectiveness but also efficiency in public spending? That's one of the key rationales that we see a lot in the field. Again, particular reason and quite diverse reasons why social sector delivery organizations might want to be involved, and similarly for investors. But again, in the interest of time, I'll move us on. I think just one final points on the different rationales for social outcome partnerships is that in practice we're seeing such a diversity of projects, and quite frankly we talk a lot about the adaptation of this sort of like quite flexible funding model to the local realities, to the particular context where it's being delivered. So I think for the discussion today, don't necessarily feel constrained by kind of what's been done so far or some of the traditional organizations we've seen involved so far, and perhaps start by thinking actually what do we need in our local context, what are the kind of key organizations that we want to work in partnership with, and what does a focus on outcomes mean for our respective organizations. So if we move on, I just wanted to emphasize that there may be very many different reasons why different organizations might want to explore a social outcome partnership. Within my team, we're very interested to understand actually from a macro perspective, from a public sector reform perspective, what is it that is interesting about this way of working? Why have local commissioners, central government commissioners have been interested in this way of working? And we've spoken to stakeholders in the field, and then we developed this framework which puts forward 3 hypotheses for why social outcome partnerships can help address these perennial challenges in public service delivery. And over the years, I've shared this framework many times with government officials from very many different countries, and it surprises me how people always tell me that it really resonates. So I think a lot of these challenges are perhaps not even unique to the UK. But what we've seen from conversations that we've had with stakeholders in the field is that social outcome partnerships are seen as effective tools for unlocking more collaboration, more prevention, and more innovation in the provision of public services. What do we mean by collaboration? I'll take them briefly one by one. Is the fact that with social outcome partnerships, we've seen them used in quite many instances. I think this is like one of the key ways in which social outcome partnerships have been used. To enable multiple commissioners to pool resources together or get multiple delivery organizations to work together to better support, provide better wraparound support services for individuals with multiple complex needs. So it's a very effective way to sort of like help us move away from silo budgets, which I know is an issue across many aspects in the public sector. The other point around prevention, so we've seen social impact bonds being used to fund those services where we know they can lead to a reduction in demand for public services, but perhaps government, local authorities are struggling to provide that upfront funding due to budgetary constraints. So in an outcomes-based model, because you only pay for results achieved, you enable this dual running of services. And then finally, in terms of innovation, we've seen social outcome partnerships used not so much for completely new, untested, innovative models, but where we've seen innovation is in the flexibility in delivery. So we've seen social outcome partnerships enabling the project stakeholders to work together in a much more flexible way and adjusting, course correcting delivery as they gather more data, as they understand better what works and what doesn't work, and as they understand better the particular needs of the individuals they are supporting. So collaboration, prevention, and innovation, sort of like three key rationales we've seen for the use of social outcome partnerships. And then finally, I promised I would give you a flavor of the state of play with social outcome partnerships. I think those of you who've put your thumbs up at the start and mentioned you have heard of or indicated you've heard of social outcome partnerships or impact bonds before. Many of you might have heard of the Peterborough Social Impact Bond, which was the first project launched in the UK by the Ministry of Justice. That was back in 2010. Since then, we've had 99 additional projects launched. So we are at 100 social outcome partnerships launched in the UK, primarily in England. And that's out of 300 globally. So the UK has been very much leading the way in this space, and it served as the inspiration for practice in lots of other geographies, really diverse places from sort of Japan to India, South Africa, and many, many other places. In terms of the projects in the UK, we've seen that most projects have been jointly funded by local and central governments. So remember when I said about the kind of collaboration element, that's we think very interesting, because we know it's often quite challenging for local and central government to pull funding, and Life Chances Fund, the program through which the Skill Mill has been funded, is one such example. Just lots more stats that I can talk you through, but again, very, very mindful of time. I know David's helpfully shared in his pre-session communications a link to the report, The Evolution of Social Outcome Partnerships in the UK, which is a publication we've put together in partnership with a community of practice in England. And it includes a lot more detail, both in terms of the mechanics of the social outcome partnerships, how they work in practice, how they've been implemented in different places across the country. And it also includes a lot of data on the projects launched to date in the UK. Final thing, because I think some of you might be wondering, well, what's on the horizon? We've got 100 social outcome partnerships launched to date. We're aware of few further projects in the pipeline, and I think many in the community of practice have watched with a lot of interest the autumn budget announcement a couple of weeks ago, because in that there was a reference to government mobilizing private investment through a social impact investment vehicle, working together with government, civil society, and the social impact investing community to focus on better outcomes for individuals with complex social problems. So, sorry, that is a very long phrase to sort of say that there is some indication in the autumn budget that the UK government at central level remains interested, very much interested in this way of working. And then we're expecting a more detailed, less abstract announcements in the spring budget in March next year. So watch this space. And then finally, I hope this has been helpful. I hope it's brought a little bit of more clarity, or perhaps it's intrigued you to find out more. On the version of the slides that has the sort of correct formatting, there's a bit more information about the Go Lab. And if not, there's a QR code here to our website where you can access lots more resources and We are also very, very happy to have conversations with government officials interested to find out more about social outcome partnerships. So feel free to drop me a line. Thank you. And Davey, sorry, I feel like I've probably gone slightly over time anyway, but I hope that was helpful for everyone.
Not at all, Andrea. Thank you very much. Yeah, really helpful. I'm just going to check with Andy. Andy, have we got any chat related questions to deal with on what we've covered so far? Just pause so we can all take a second to absorb. We move on to Russell next. So I'm going to introduce Russell Webster, who some of you may already know, who has been involved in undertaking the evaluation of the Skill Mill programme funded through the Life Chances Fund. So Russell, are you?
I'm here, Davey, I'm here.
Excellent. Over to you, Russell.
Lovely, thank you very much. If you do the next slide for me, please. I'm not going to talk you through the evaluation in terms of the process, but just so you know, it was a fairly large scale evaluation. It's almost complete. We're just waiting for the final outcomes. Obviously, reconviction and kind of job outcomes happen sometime after the actual program's finished. So obviously we've talked quite a lot about the social impact bond and the mechanics of that. So I'm just going to focus on what we found out about the program itself. Next slide, please, Davey. Lovely. So as you've heard, really, it is a unique program, and I think it's both much more intensive in terms that it's 5 days a week, and extensive that it's full-time for 6 months than anything else in this kind of space, in the offender employment space and young people space. To be honest, it's probably easiest to describe it in real world terms, because I think that is the real strength of the program. So young people are doing real work setting, but within what we've kind of called a forgiving context. So in other words, young people would struggle to get a job because of their record. If they got a job, the likelihood of them maintaining it at the start of the program was very kind of slim. So this program combines those two bits. So in other words, it's proper work. It's not pretend work. It's not, it is hard work, but it's a variety of work with a lot of skills learned along the way. But if you lose it, as most young people do in the early days, if you don't turn up, as most young people do in the early days, then you can come back the next day. The proper pay, and by proper pay, I mean about 200 quid a week, about 30, 40 pound a day, is really critical, because it's a massive incentive, but it mirrors the real world. So in other words, if you turn up and work properly today, you get paid. If you turn up and mess about, you don't get paid, you get sent home. If you don't turn up tomorrow, you don't get paid. So young people quite quickly realize that if they turn up and work, they do get paid. And you know what it's like at that age. Start Monday morning, you think, right, what can I do with 150 quid? In your head, you've already spent it. So if at the end of the week you've only got 60 quid because you didn't turn up 3 days, it's a powerful kind of motivator. And a lot of young people told us that they got home knackered and they soon realized that they really wanted that pay. So they couldn't be playing PlayStation till 2 or 3 in the morning. They couldn't be up all night smoking dope or whatever. And quite quickly, and surprisingly quickly, I think most people got into that routine. And that having money to spend on themselves, and interestingly, often having money to spend on family or girlfriends was really important to people. There's some really nice stories of people a lot of young men in single parent households who were actually able to help out financially, not most weeks, but once in a while. And the way that made them feel to kind of contribute was absolutely kind of massive. Did enormous benefit to their self-esteem. There's one really nice story that one young man took his mum out for her birthday to the local harvester or whatever, and he wore his skill mill uniform. So he's telling the supervisor the next day, and the supervisor said, "What? Couldn't you be bothered, to get changed?" He said, "You're joking. I wanted everyone to see that I'm working." And I know most people on the call are from youth offending services, so the value of this kind of identity, this value of achieving after a life of being told you can't achieve. It's really makes a difference. And the other thing I think is that a lot of the work is real world work, proper work, and you can't really recreate the impact. Again, kind of anecdotes, but one team have worked really hard at kind of flood defences, so back-breaking work, not really. But then someone came over locally, walking their dog, came over and said, "Oh, thanks so much, lads. Every time we have massive rainfall, it floods. It floods in my garden, it floods the bottom of my street. This will make a real difference." And you can try and build someone's self-esteem as much as you like, but actually that genuine, unsolicited, real feedback really made a huge difference to kind of young people. The role of the supervisor, I think, is critical. When I started, I thought, well, that's a cushy job, isn't it? Caseload of 4, you're laughing. I had to be disabused of that once I'd spoken to kind of all the supervisors, because it is demanding. So trying to manage power tools with 4 kind of young people who in their, the early stages of the project, 1 or 2 would generally be, not particularly kind of interested in doing that work, was hard work. But the kind of culture was that they were a team. So not a team of 4, but a team of 5, that the supervisor was part of the team. And most had worked out a real kind of balance of contributing to the work, showing people how to use tools and do other things kind of properly, while not ending up obviously doing the bulk of the work themselves. But that feeling that they had someone on their side, and obviously over 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, those relationships became quite tight, both between the group as peers, but also with the supervisor. One of the things that have worked well is that recruitment of supervisors was done, I'm not sure quite what the proper phrase was, but was done selectively, shall we say. In other words, someone at the YOS said, "Well, didn't Terry used to be a carpenter before he worked for us? He'd be perfect for this." And that is the sort of way in which people were recruited, because actually they needed young people skills and they needed practical skills. So that actual encouraging a specific individual to do that job worked out in the whole really well. And I think that's kind of critical. The other bit was, because young people came from the yacht, because often they might meet at the yacht in the mornings, or because the supervisor had been recruited from the YOS, actually the whole work was embedded within the youth offending service. So if there was something major or new going on at home, of course they might talk that through with the supervisor, but they could also access easily any kind of specialist support or particular services they needed. And where people were being supervised on orders, the supervisor knew exactly what was going on with them. I think the one bit where we would have said would make a big difference, that I know Davey and the team are looking to add on this time, is aftercare. Because it was a 6-month intensive program, essentially a new cohort started. Although a supervisor might try and provide some sort of ongoing support, the reality is it was very difficult to do that while running the new cohort. And I think that will make a huge kind of difference in terms of outcomes. But essentially, young people developed a work habit, they felt better about themselves, they enjoyed the variety of skills. But I think the main gains were self-esteem, sense of identity, and the real belief in themselves that they could get a job, that they could build a life for themselves. I hope that's more or less the time. I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Russell, and yes, just thank you for your work and your critical eye over all of this. So it's really appreciated. Andy, do we have any questions?
Yeah, David, questions are starting to come in now. There's a couple around the contributions from local youth justice services, which hopefully Mila will be covering in the next bit of the presentation, and then a question around who provides the supervisor, which I think we can probably pick up at the end of Mila's slot.
Yeah.
So if people could just bear with us on those, and we'll answer those very shortly.
Okay, thank you, Andy. So Mila, introduce you to everyone.
Indeed. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much, David. Thank you, everybody, for making the time, and really nice to see so many people on the call. So yes, as David said, I am the Chief Executive and founder of British Outcomes Partnerships, and we do a lot of work around helping create outcomes partnerships, helping deliver them, and also pooling together the social investment from a range of foundations, the government, housing associations, and so on, to provide some of that upfront funding for outcomes models. But I'll go through that in a little bit more detail. So if we move on to the next slide, Davey, if that's okay. So we have now heard this from Andrea and Davey, but I suppose just as a summary again, we have where outcomes models are particularly effective is in situations where one needs really personalized holistic support. So on this right-hand side, so there are issues where more standardized, more centralized approaches are indeed effective, like routine operations, like vaccine delivery, and they're coming up with a model that is the same for everybody, and it's implemented in a consistent way for everybody. It works, but actually when we talk about the young people and young adults who are being supported through SkillMill, like here the example is managing long-term conditions, but most importantly in this case managing reoffending and improvements in their lives, that does require a different approach for different individuals, and it's the supervisors who work really closely with the young people to achieve that. And we've heard that in detail now from Davey and from Andy and from the evaluation. So that's where we've historically found outcomes partnerships to be really effective, because you can outline that shared vision and then you have the flexibility in delivery to figure out how to implement it. So that's kind of what is it that we're all trying to do. And if we move on to the next slide, the some of the principles of working, which actually Andrea has covered already in quite a bit of detail, we find continuously that it is three crucial kind of improvements which are enabled through outcomes partnerships. So as Andrea said, really deep collaboration across all of the partners, really flexible delivery, because the delivery is not prescribed through a highly specified contract, and then clear as possible accountability for those outcomes that we all agree on. And we do have a link here to a learning report, which hopefully may be useful to you, which we'll include in the chat. And so then on the next page, we are just outlining what, in this case, so in the case of SkillMill, what are some of the milestones and outcomes which have been agreed as a rate card, if you will, that the outcome funders have been funding. So this is the example of the SkillMill delivery, which has happened pre thus far over the last few years with the co-commissioning from the Life Chances Fund, as David mentioned, which was a central government initiative to co-commission with a range of different local authorities to recognize that that co-commissioning would enable more holistic services. And you can see here the quote-unquote rate card, or a set of milestones and outcomes which the Life Chances Fund and the local authorities were paying for, include basically the start, so actually helping identifying the young person and helping engage them in the program. Then the induction completion, so making sure that the young person goes through all of the processes of onboarding and has a plan of what it is that the young person is working towards. And then basically a qualification that the young person is working through that 6-month work with the supervisor and the actual work that they are completing. The 6-month completion, so the young person has actually completed the 6-month program, and then looking at the employment and education as the follow-on outcome from the program, as well as 12-month reoffending checks, which we heard from the evaluation. So those were the outcomes which were agreed in the previous delivery, and this is, we think this is quite a good starting point, but this is something that we would also want to be working through with the partners for this next iteration of delivery. So then if we move on to the next slide, this then shows just kind of a simple or an attempt to have a simple view of what that then means for the actual funding to SkillMill. So if SkillMill was being paid on inputs, so kind of the agreed setup of the delivery, then you can see that the funding would be coming in as these green bars, the costs would be incurred as the red bars, and this dotted black line in the middle is basically the net cash position. So it would be neutral effectively. But because the payments are happening for outcomes, and as you saw in the previous slide, some of the highest payments were for the reduction in reoffending. So that, and that is coming 12 months later, 12 months after the delivery, or 12 months plus after the delivery starts. That then means that you can see the green bars in terms of the funding coming in are coming in quite a lot later, but the costs obviously have to start even before go live, because you're mobilizing and you're setting up the service. And that's what then creates this dip. And basically this delta in terms of the dip towards the dotted black line is what needs to be somehow funded upfront. And that's where the social investment that we're pulling from a range of different foundations, as I said, and the government is funding some of that upfront delivery. And so if we move on to the next slide, the second really important role of the social investment is the fact that not only does it provide some of that upfront funding, it also manages for the uncertainty which can happen around the level of outcomes achieved. So you can see that the black line is kind of an assumed profile of the outcomes to be achieved, but what actually happens in practice can greatly vary. So it can, more outcomes can be achieved, so that's the green line on the right-hand side, or less outcomes can be achieved, which is the red line. And the point of the social funding is that it can be that flexible investment which is needed to continuously invest in delivery, recognizing that uncertainty which exists. And the report that Andrea shared from the Government Outcomes Lab goes through that in quite a lot of detail in a really clear way. And that's that second link that I included here, which talks about the role of patient and flexible social investment, which is to fund those innovations which maximize impact while also shielding the delivery from the fact that you have that uncertain level of outcomes achieved. So those are kind of the mechanics and why some of that funding is needed. I went through already the kind of practice which is then enabled through outcomes partnerships, which you have heard already from Davy and from Andrea around the collaboration, the flexibility, the accountability, but also the kind of rate card, if you will, or the set of outcomes to which ScaleMill has been delivering in the previous iteration of this outcomes partnership. And I think on the next slide, I think that's the last slide. Yeah, indeed. So over the last 12 plus years, there have been, or there continues to be a growing number of pioneering social investors who are wanting to support this work, and the organizations that we have been pulling into the delivery, like ScaleMill, include the Cabinet Office, Esme Fairbairn Foundation, Nesta, Big Society Capital, or now it's called Better Society Capital, some of the specialist pools of funding, like from the European Investment Fund, but also from some of the pension funds where they have very specialist pools of funding for the local investment in their areas, so in their patch. But yes, as you can see, it is a range of different foundations and organizations which are really focused and committed on catalyzing innovation in delivery, enabling that clearest possible accountability for outcomes and improving people's lives, and are also really excited about kind of some of the system shifts that we can collectively create around enabling some of the more preventative services and delivery. So I'll stop here, Davy, if that's okay.
Brilliant, Mila, thank you so much. I thought maybe I can also just, following on from that, just mention that the outcome payments from local authorities through the Life Chances Fund social outcomes contract was capped, and it was capped at £50,000 per year. In answer to one of the questions in the chat, so we're looking at around that sort of number, maybe a little bit higher, because of the increased costs over the past year. We set up the last SIB, or social outcomes contract, in 2018, right? So the costs were kind of fixed up until 2024. So costs have increased considerably, as we all know, since then. And linked to that, with most of the local authorities seconding a member of staff to the supervisor role, then some of the canny local authorities were able to do that in such a way that they didn't need to backfill that post. So the actual cost for some local authorities who didn't backfill the post, who had the cost of that member of staff met through ScaleMill, resulted in them having a much lower net cost over the year. So it's something we need to work through with every local authority, really. Secondees work very well, but equally, directly hired staff by ScaleMill have also worked well. So there's a range of options available to us all. And the thing I would say is that getting the expression of interest into us is really important. That will allow us to then work with you in a co-creative way, or work all together in a co-creative way with Mila and the team at Bridges, with central government outcome pairs as well, to design the model which will ultimately determine what the costs will be for every local authority. So just mention that just on the back of what Mila has presented. Another thing about our program is, as we know, it's about providing services. We're a social enterprise, we deliver services. It's a real job, so it has to exist in the real world, as Russell said. And one of our key partners in doing that has been Commercial Estates Group in Leeds. And we have Lucinda here to tell us about that. But before I do that, Andy's hand's gone up, so quickly over to Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. It's just to reiterate, because there's a couple of questions around the cost, and so I just thought it was worth just flagging that we haven't got exact details. And I know you just said that, but being very clear that that's because we're at the sort of starting phase of the process, but that the social outcome partnership means that the cost would only ever be if you've got 100% success rate. So you don't ever meet that full cost if all the young people that you refer onto the program over the course of the 4 years successfully completed the program. And that's the wondrous bit about social outcome partnerships for local commissioners. The total contribution will depend on exactly how much investment we're able to get into the program, through the bridges, but also from outcome payers, either local commissioners or central government commissioners, but also through income generation from commercial partners, and that's where Lucinda comes in. So hopefully that makes it a little bit clearer. I'll pick up Tom's question about what it looks like in terms of the difference between the current iteration and the new one shortly. Lucinda.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, Lucinda.
Thank you, everyone. Hi, lovely to meet you all. I'm Lucinda Eden. I'm the Social Impact Manager for CEG, which was Commercial Estates Group. And I failed miserably and didn't do my homework and bring slides. So you've got me just to kind of talk you through my experience of working with the Skill Mill. I've worked at CEG now for about 6.5 years, but before that, I was Deputy Leader of Leeds City Council. So with various different hats, I've had experience with the Skill Mill. As David and Andy said, we are a customer of the Skill Mill, but we also see ourselves as very important. You know, the Skill Mill being a very important partner to ours. We are a large investor developer, and we are also a commercial landlord. So not naturally the kind of social impact thinking people that you would assume to. We're property developers, but we recognise that social impact and social value is becoming an increasingly important part of business, and showing that you are a good business. So we've specifically got a number of different programmes, particularly in Leeds, but also wider, where we look at what impact we make on the neighbours around our development, and with a specific emphasis on jobs and skills. So the concept of social value is kind of a hot topic when it comes to construction and development, and I really see the Skill Mill as a perfect and a very good example of what true social value is. It's not just about kind of corporate social responsibility. It's about how decisions that you make as a business can make that positive social impact. So we use the Skill Mill significantly through our developments in Leeds, where we would normally use a contractor. So rather than going to an ordinary large contractor to do, you know, land clearance or vegetation clearance, or, you know, outdoor activities, we go to the Skill Mill. And through that relationship, we have supported, I think now we're on over 70 young people who have worked on our sites with paid work between this partnership between CEG and the Skill Mill. So for us as a developer, it's about making sure that the pound that we spend is used not only to do the work that we need to do, but also to improve the lives of young people. And that's really important for our corporate messaging around our commitment to social value and social impact, but also the relationships that we have in the city, particularly in Leeds. So we work very closely with the City Council and the guys at the Skill Mill to make sure it's a partnership. As part of my role, I also oversee a jobs and skills program that we run called Forging Futures, and we want to make sure that the guys who are involved with the Skill Mill are part of that. So we've had a number of our young people who've come through the Skill Mill who've then gone on as well to Forging Futures and have made amazing success. So we've had young people who had experience of of gangs and drug offences and knife offences who come to us and worked on our site really successfully, and are now in apprentices, and was last year nominated as a apprentice of the year, for example. So, but it's very much a joined up process between us and the skill mill, and yeah, it's so important for a business to start thinking about how we use our pound to buy services, and to be able to do that through a social enterprise such as Skill Mill it really underpins some of our values. And the first time I ever came across the Skill Mill was when I was an elected councillor, and they just started working with CEG before I worked for CEG, and Leeds had been significantly flooded during Boxing Day 2016, and I got a phone call from CEG saying, "Councillor, we've got this group of really great lads and they're going to come out and help doing some clearing after the floods. Where do you want them?" And it was the Skill Mill, and 7-8 years later, I'm now the one who's saying, right, when are we going to use the Skill Mill? It's about long-term relationships which really work.
Thanks, Lucinda, and yeah, again, thank you and everyone at CEG for the support. It's the model example of a partnership with Skill Mill, and yeah, thank you so much for that. I'm conscious that we've got 10 minutes left. Naomi Hackney has a question. Naomi's a hand up. Do you want me to put you unmute you and you can ask it? Are you there, Naomi? Naomi was asking about the Skill Mill in London, and how we deal with the issue of diversity. So we ran a Skill Mill team in Croydon for 4 years, and we had very much a BME population coming through that team. We had a BME supervisor, female supervisor, who was absolutely fantastic for us in managing that team. So yeah, absolutely. The young people that we're working with, we want to reflect them in the work we do, and the people that are supporting them. So hopefully that will answer your question. Actually, we've got Marina on the call from Croydon. Marina, is there anything, if I can unmute you, maybe you can comment?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
You can? All right. Hi all, I'm Marina from Croydon Youth Justice Service. I'm the practice manager, E2E lead. We've been involved with Skill Mill from March 2020. We started in the midst of COVID actually. So the first year and a half was kind of challenging due to the COVID constraints. However, the last 2 years or so, we've run 7 cohorts from the beginning, and as Davey said, we had a supervisor. She was the only female on the team, a black female. Our groups are very diverse. We have diverse groups of young people coming through, including we've had a young black female as well, that's actually come through and worked for the Skill Mill, went down really well. This job is kind of everything to them. Just yesterday we had a presentation, and we done the Skill Mill summer jobs, and we had people from the Youth Justice Board and a mayor and someone from Number 10 come, and we had 2 young people that went through the Skill Mill summer jobs, and the difference it makes to their lives is sometimes it's not measurable. It's their self-esteem, it's their self-worth. It helps out the families financially. It gives them hope, and it helps them to gain work ethics and kind of move on and really think about their identity and how they'd like to actually move forward in life. So yeah, it works, and we're interested again. If we can afford that fee, David, then yeah, we're interested again.
Okay. Well, that's
So David, there's a few more.
Yeah. So I'm just going to say on the back of that, Marina, just I mean, expressions of interest. There is absolutely no harm in doing that. And what that will do, it will give us a lot of leverage when it comes to negotiating with central government. So we are working with the Ministry of Justice, Department of Work and Pensions, Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, and others to get that support. So the more expressions of interest we have, the more leverage we have with central government. So yeah, don't let the fee put you off right now.
Okay,
because
so I'll fill that out and
yeah,
I've sent the rest to Emma. So I'll complete that,
absolutely, and
Davey.
same
Okay.
message to everyone. Yeah, thank you, Marina.
All right, you're
So-
welcome.
Sorry, Andy.
I'm just saying there's a lot of questions in the chat and in the Q&A, and the vast majority are around the issue of cost. So clearly, colleagues are indicating that they're not able to make a decision unless there's a bit of greater clarity around the sort of cost. Certainly on the last SIB, it was capped at 50k, as Davey says. It won't be capped at that level because things have gone up. We had I think it was an 18% increase in 16 and 17-year-old minimum wage, which is fairly significant just on its own. Tom, your question about the in the last iteration, the cost of the supervisor was included, and that will be the case again in this. But the exact figures that we don't know at this point in time. If the yacht were able to second somebody, and as Davey said, we're there are advantages and disadvantages to both ways of doing it. When we've recruited people in, we've got some great people in there. From the Youth Justice Services point of view, it probably works a little bit better if you've got somebody internally. There can be benefits for the skill mill in relation to sort of improved local contacts when you've got somebody that's part of a local authority rather than an independent organisation. But it swings and roundabouts about which is better. So if you were providing the member of staff, then we would be able to pay for that member of staff from it. If we were recruiting, then the figure would be a total figure, and it would be an annual figure rather than over the 4 years of the programme. When we reach that final figure. So just looking at. So Tom wanted to know about what the difference was between the current iteration and the new iteration. We've recognised that there was a bit of gap in our ability to deliver on the employment training and education side of things. So including 3 pathway workers to support young people at the end of the programme and to work with them during their skill mill journey to try and improve that side of things and to make better use of existing opportunities that there are within local areas. We also recognise that the commercial sales isn't either Davey or my skill set. I think we've done okay in terms of that, but we've got some expertise built into the program there to hopefully be able to do that and to make it a bit easier for the skill mill to meet some of those income generation targets. And there's also additional operational manager capacity. Davey, you got your hand up? I'll shut up.
Yes, no. The other bit is that because we've got relationships with some very large national employers. I mean, CEG obviously being one, but many others like Wade's Group, like Kier Construction. There's an opportunity for the Pathways advisors to also help a wider group of children. So for the yachts to think about this program helping a very discreet, very hard to help group of young people through employment at the skill mill, but also for those Pathways advisors to help a much wider group of children coming through the yacht access opportunities directly through our partners. And that's going to be a significant enhancement to the previous program, where we're talking to yachts about the wider cohort and how we can help more young people who are NEET into jobs specifically with those employers that we've partnered with for a long time now, to create more opportunities. So there's a lot of added value with the additional posts that we'll create, the Pathways Advisors.
Thanks, David. Just some additional questions. So a question around risk assessments. Yes, we've got risk assessments in place. They obviously need contextualizing for each different location, but a lot of the work is quite similar. We store all that on a shared drive that all supervisors get access to. So all secondees would be party to the raft of practices and procedures that the skill mills got in place. The locations, this is about growing the skill mill, scaling it up, and so we're looking for 16 expressions of interest, and if you were able to be one of those locations, then that's what this expression of interest is about. It's about running a skill mill in your local area. We have, Tom, to answer your question around different local authorities, we've had experience of running sort of like very rural areas like North Yorkshire and Northumberland and Norfolk versus city centre yachts like Leeds. I think you probably have to focus on a particular area within your local authority or within one of the local authorities, because just for the practicalities, just in terms of getting the young people together, that's you know, to make it work, there's a whole sort of practical set of requirements that involve getting the 4 young people into the van every day of the week, so they need to be sort of like fairly close together just for that reason. Another question from Naomi. I'm hoping we've covered up all the questions. Please do email either Davey or myself, or just give us a ring, and we'll run you through in a bit more detail some of the specifics for your particular areas.
Thanks very much, Andy. It's now 2:15. I can't believe we kind of managed to cover everything on time. So thank you very much to all of our speakers, and to everyone else for coming. And Tom, you've managed to squeeze in a final question. Do you want to ask the question yourself, and I'll turn your mic on. Tom, can you
hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. I'm just I can see the EOIs need to be in pretty imminently. Is there going to be another round of this next year? Because it looks like you put an expression of interest in with a commitment for 4 years. So is it kind of EOI before the end of November, or we don't get another chance for another 4 years? Because I mean, it's a brilliant concept. It's just tricky to get it under the nose of chief execs.
So the process that we're running right now is invite as many yachts as possible to start the process with us in terms of discussing how to take this forward. As everything's quite fluid, so we're having discussions with central government. Andrea mentioned this potential new outcomes fund that the Treasury are looking at with DCMS. So there's opportunities down the road, and we would like as many youth offending services and as many children as possible to benefit from this funding, because it's very competitive. We want to be in there with a very strong proposal to central government to fund this to a healthy level, which will reduce the cost for local authorities, and the more corporate support we can get, the better again. which reduces the cost for local authorities. So yes, we've said 29th of November for expressions of interest, but that's the start of the process to co-design something with all of the local authorities that are interested and eventually get to a point where we can launch. I have to say that last time round, we did include one local authority after the beginning of the programme. It is complicated because it's a contract, and really we need all the stakeholders to sign the same contract. If we add people later, it becomes difficult because then it's a new contract, and you know, contracts are like that means lawyers and that means cost. So to try and keep the cost down. So my suggestion would be to try as much as possible to at least get the expression of interest in, and it's non-binding at this stage. And as I said, it would help us enormously to have, the maximum number of interested local authorities in there that we can then take to the Ministry of Justice and open up those conversations around the level of support that central government can provide. So we can take it from there, Tom.
Thanks.
Okay, so it's now almost 10 to. So yeah, thanks again to all the speakers. Thanks to everyone for coming. We will make sure that the recording goes out to everyone. Watch this space. We'll be in touch with you all. If you've got any questions, as Andy said, you know where we are. Okay, thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.